There are stretches of highway in America where your GPS stops behaving like technology and starts behaving like a suggestion. Roads that seem longer at night. Exit signs that appear twice. Radio stations that drift in and out like distant memories instead of broadcasts. And somewhere out there, between dead towns, pine forests, and forgotten country lines, people occasionally report finding places that should not exist. A diner open at 3 a.m. with no employees. A motel that disappears by sunrise. A gas station no local remembers building. The strangest thing was not that the gas station existed. The strange thing was it had not been there yesterday, and by morning, it was gone again. Welcome back to Tavern Reflections. Pull up a chair, pour yourself something warm, and settle in for tonight's reflection. Tonight's story drifts down lonely highways, through dead radio stations, and into the strange roadside places people only seem to find when they're exhausted enough to stop trusting their own memory. Jack Tucker once claimed there are roads in America that stop caring where you meant to go, roads that only care whether you're lost enough to notice what's waiting beside them. Tonight's reflection may be one of those roads. If you enjoy strange stories, eerie reflections, and darker wanderings through the edges of reality, more strange doors await at TravisSivart.com. Last name same as the first, but in reverse. But more about tonight's story. It's about empty roads, old neon signs, and the unsettling possibility that some places exist only for travelers who have become lost in ways a map cannot fix. Now then, let's hit that road. I've always believed there's something psychologically dangerous about driving alone at night for too long. Not physically dangerous, though yes, statistically speaking, launching yourself down an unlit highway at 70 miles per hour inside a metal box powered by controlled explosions is not ideal for long-term survival. In this case, I mean mentally dangerous. There comes a point, usually somewhere after midnight, where the brain starts slipping sideways. Road lines become hypnotic. Distances stop feeling real. Whether it's that long distance or that short distance of watching ahead of you. Time stretches. You stop thinking in destinations and begin thinking only in motion forward. Just keep moving forward. That was the state Daniel Mercer was in when he found the gas station. Or perhaps when the gas station found him. Daniel had been driving north through rural Maine in late November after attending his father's funeral. Not a dramatic funeral. No rainstorms, no ravens, no cinematic speeches beside a grave while violins mourned in the background. Pretty normal, actually. Just tired people in folding chairs, eating supermarket sandwiches and chicken, and quietly trying not to look relieved. The suffering was finally over. For them and the one they lost. Daniel left immediately afterward. He didn't want to stay in town. He didn't want condolences. He didn't want old family friends saying things like, "Your father was a good man." Especially because complicated grief leaves you wanting to answer. Sometimes. By the time he reached Route 117, it was nearly 1 in the morning. His GPS had lost signal an hour earlier. His phone battery hovered at 3%. He didn't have a charger in the car, and his fuel gauge sat just above empty. Outside, the forest pressed close to the road, like something listening. No houses, no traffic, no lights except his headlights and the occasional weak glow of the moon between clouds. The radio drifted between static and half-audible stations. At one point, a weather broadcast repeated itself 3 times in identical wording before dissolving into what sounded suspiciously like distant choir music. Daniel turned it off. Silence felt safer. That's another lie humans tell themselves. Then he saw the sign. Gas, food, open. The neon buzzed weakly in the darkness ahead. 2 old-fashioned gas pumps. Not the modern, square, boxy kind with digital readouts. But 2 old-fashioned gas pumps stood beneath a rusted metal awning. Behind them sat a low building, with wide front windows glowing amber against the trees. Not all sleek metal and glass, but painted cinder block. Daniel slowed immediately, because he was certain the station had not been there before. He'd driven this road dozens of times growing up. There was nothing at this bend except forest and abandoned logging trail. And yet, there it stood. The kind of roadside station that looked trapped somewhere between decades. Not modern enough. Not old enough. Timeless in the worst possible way. Daniel pulled up beside the pump. The numbers on the pump were mechanical, not digital. The kind that rolled forward with little clicking sounds. He stared at them for several seconds before opening his car door and stepping out into the cold. The air smelled strange. Not wrong. Familiar. Coffee, gasoline, rain on the pavement, French fries. Old cigarette smoke, buried deep into wood paneling. The smell every roadside stop in America blended together into one exhausted memory. Inside, a bell jingled softly over the door. The convenience store was warm. Bit too warm. The kind of warmth that immediately makes you sleepy. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with canned soup, crackers, dusty motor oil bottles, faded candy bars, and brands Daniel didn't recognize. The coffee machine hissed quietly beside a rack of postcards showing places nearby that no longer existed. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like tired insects. Behind the counter stood an older man in a gray work shirt. No name tag, no expression. Just calm eyes that looked unsurprised that Daniel had arrived. "Long road tonight?" the man asked. Daniel nodded. "Yeah." The man glanced towards the windows. "Longer than usual." Something about the way he said it made Daniel uncomfortable. It wasn't threatening, just heavy. Weighted. Like a sentence carrying more meaning than it should. There were 4 other people inside. A truck driver hunched over coffee near the window. A woman in a red coat, quietly crying into a paper napkin. An older couple eating pie without speaking. And a teenage boy asleep in a booth beneath a dull, flickering amber bulb. None of them looked up when Daniel entered. That bothered him more than if they had stared. People acknowledge newcomers in isolated places, you know? Especially at 1 a.m. They at least look at them. See who's coming in. What they might have to deal with. But these people behave like passengers trapped together on a delayed flight. Too exhausted for curiosity. Stuck in their own little loops. In their own heads. Their own life. Daniel grabbed a coffee and a packaged sandwich from the cooler. The expiration date read April 12th, 1997. He frowned at it, then reached in and checked another item. No expiration date at all. The newspaper near the register carried unfamiliar headlines. One referenced a snowstorm in 1986. Another mentioned a bridge collapse Daniel vaguely remembered from childhood. Another simply read, Moonlight Advisory continues. No date, no explanation. Daniel looked up at the man behind the counter. You got weird newspapers here. The man behind the counter just shrugged. People leave things behind. Daniel laughed awkwardly. The man didn't. Outside, snow had begun falling. Daniel could have sworn it had been raining moments earlier. The truck driver stood and stretched slowly. As he passed Daniel, he muttered, Road south's gone again. Daniel frowned. What? But the man kept walking. Daniel watched through the windows as the trucker stepped outside. Only there was no truck. There was no headlights, no sound of an engine starting. The man simply disappeared into the darkness beyond the pumps. The woman in the red coat continued crying softly into her coffee. Daniel approached the counter. How far is the next station? The attendant looked at him for a long moment. Then, depends where you're headed. Bangor. The man tilted his head slightly. Haven't heard that answer in a while. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. The clocks inside the station didn't agree. The clock above the coffee machine read 2:14. The microwave displayed 11:38. A wall clock near the bathrooms ticked backwards 1 second every few minutes. Looking at his watch, Daniel noticed it had stopped entirely. He suddenly realized something else. Nobody had entered since he arrived. Nobody had left either, besides the one trucker. But did he really leave? Not really. The older couple disappeared at some point without standing up. The teenage boy in the booth changed clothes between glances. First a hoodie, then a denim jacket. then what looked disturbingly like an old military uniform. Daniel rubbed at his eyes, hard, feeling them roll under his fingers. That dangerous pressure that feels somewhere between comforting and blinding. Sleep deprivation, he decided. Stress, grief. That's all this was. The attendant poured fresh coffee into the machine. Most folks find us when they're running low. Daniel glanced at the pumps. Yeah, almost empty. The attendant looked directly at him. I know. That sentence settled into the room like a fog. Daniel suddenly wanted to leave more than he wanted anything all night. He paid cash for the gas and sandwich. The receipt printed painfully slowly, chugging out, as tired as he was. As the paper curled into his hand, he noticed there was no total listed. Only this: thank you for stopping. Outside, the snow had stopped. Now thick fog drifted around the pumps instead. Daniel froze beside his car as he was leaving. The vehicles in the parking lot had changed. Rusted pickup truck sat near the edge of the lot. Beside it stood a station wagon from the 1970s. Near the windows rested an ambulance with no markings. He was certain none of them had been there earlier, and he hadn't seen people come in. And his own car was covered in dirt and ice, thick enough to suggest it had been sitting abandoned for weeks. Daniel touched the hood. Freezing cold. No engine heat. No sign he had recently driven it at all. Station door opened behind him, the attendant stepping out, carrying a rag. Funny thing about roads, he said. Daniel turned slowly. What is this place? The old man looked towards the dark highway. Crossroads, mostly. That doesn't answer my question. Usually means it's the right answer. Daniel's pulse hammered now, his head gently throbbing. He was unsure if it was anger or exhaustion. I'm leaving. Most do. Daniel yanked open the driver's side door of his car. Inside sat his overnight bag, a funeral pamphlet, and something else. A newspaper clipping. Local man critically injured in Route 117 collision. The article was about him. He glanced at the date and saw it was 3 days earlier. Daniel stared at the photo until the words blurred. No, he whispered. The attendant leaned slightly against the pump. Takes people a while. Daniel climbed out slowly. What happened to me? The old man shrugged. Not really my department. Am I dead? The attendant turned his head, glancing upwards as if he was checking the weather, as he considered the question seriously. Then, looking back, you're tired. That answer somehow frightened Daniel more. Inside the station, the woman in the red coat finally looked up from her coffee. Her mascara streaked down her face. "I think my husband's waiting for me outside," she whispered to nobody. The teenage boy in the booth was gone now. The older couple had reappeared, and the truck driver sat back at the counter drinking coffee like he had never left. And through the windows, the weather kept changing. Daniel realizing he was back inside, not remembering having moved away from his car, or the attendant joining him inside. Looking towards the weather, he saw snow, rain, sunlight, fog, darkness. Over and over again. Daniel realized the station was not sitting beside one road. It sat beside many. Some places exist because humans need them to. Taverns, late-night diners, churches, hospitals, truck stops glowing beneath lonely midnight skies. I once heard Jack Tucker describe them as way stations for tired souls. At the time, I assumed he meant that poetically. Standing beneath that flickering gas station sign, I wasn't so sure anymore. Tiny roadside gas stations glowing in the middle of nowhere. Little islands of light where exhausted people gather between destinations. And maybe this place existed for travelers who had become lost in deeper ways. People between endings, between lives, between decisions, between grief, whatever comes after grief. The attendant refilled the coffee machine again. "Funny thing," he said quietly. "What?" "Most folks don't actually want directions." Daniel looked at him. "They want permission to stop driving." That one single line hit harder than the funeral had. Because suddenly Daniel understood how tired he really was. Not physically, existentially. The kind of exhaustion sleep cannot fix. The woman in the red coat stood first. She walked calmly toward the exit. Outside the windows, bright summer sunlight waited for her despite the snow still falling beyond the pumps. She smiled faintly before stepping into it. Gone. The truck driver finished his coffee next. Outside, thunder rolled across a desert highway, stretching beneath orange skies. It's beautiful, in a cryptic, post-apocalyptic sort of way. He tipped his hat once toward the attendant, not even noticing Daniel, and walked into the storm. Gone. One by one, people left. Different roads, different weather, different destinations. Eventually, only Daniel remained. The attendant wiped down the counter slowly. "You staying long?" Daniel looked around the station, at the warm lights, the coffee smell, the low hum of refrigerators, the terrible comfort of familiarity. Always been a problem saying that one. Part of him wanted to stay forever. Sit in that booth right there. Let the road disappear entirely. No more decisions. No more funerals. No more carrying old damage. Like luggage without wheels weighing you down. Unsure if you should lift it and carry it or just drag it. The attendant seemed to notice. "Can't stay parked forever," he said. Daniel laughed weakly. "Feels like I've been driving my whole life." "Most people do." Outside, the fog began thinning. The highway beyond the station, it looked normal again. Cold, empty, real. Daniel stared at it, then back at the attendant. "What happens now?" The old man smiled. Just a little quirk, the corner of his mouth, and a raising of his eyebrows. "You keep going." Daniel nodded slowly, and for reasons he could never fully explain afterward. That answer felt like enough. He left the building and got back into his car. This time, the engine was warm. The fuel gauge read full, and as he pulled away from the pumps and glanced into his mirror, the attendant raised one hand in a quiet farewell beneath the buzzing neon sign. Daniel drove for nearly 20 minutes before realizing something. There had been no turnoff, no side road, no station, nothing. Only uninterrupted forest. At sunrise, he turned around and searched for it, again and again, going back and forth up and down that same tired stretch of road, that same remembered pavement that had something more to it and something less. And again, nothing. No building, no tire tracks, no electrical lines, not even a foundation. Just trees and silence. But years later, Daniel still keeps that receipt folded in his wallet. The paper has faded almost completely now. Only one line remains readable. "Thank you for stopping." And to this day, whenever he drives alone at night with the fuel gauge running low, part of him still hopes the sign will appear again. The reason stories like this linger in the human mind is because gas stations occupy a strange psychological space in modern life. They're not destinations. They're pauses, temporary shelters between where we were and where we hope we're going. You stop there tired, mildly disoriented, emotionally raw, caffeinated beyond medical recommendation, and existentially vulnerable at 2 a.m. while eating peanuts that expired during a previous presidential administration. In older times, travelers searched for campfires. Now, we search for fluorescent lights and coffee machines. Different technology, same instinct. Humans need refuge during transitions. And maybe that's why lonely roadside places feel so haunted. Not by ghosts necessarily, but by emotional residue, grief, exhaustion, loneliness, relief regret. Every traveler eventually reaches a point where they no longer are sure of whether they are searching for a destination or permission to stop. Perhaps that's why the idea of a hidden gas station resonates, at least with me, so deeply. Because somewhere inside ourselves, most of us suspect there may come a night when we're too tired to continue alone. And on that night, we hope a light will still be on somewhere. Thank you for spending part of your night here in the tavern. If you enjoy strange stories, eerie reflections, weird roadside mysteries, and darker little wanderings along forgotten roads, more strange doors await at TravisSivart.com. Jack Tucker supposedly believed every traveler eventually finds a road that was never meant to appear on any map. I sincerely hope he was wrong. Until next time, mind the shadows and travel carefully after midnight.